Good morning and welcome to our regularly appointed Thursday broadcast. We apologize for not being with you for the last couple of weeks. My name is Dr. Sean Williams and I am the lead professor of political science here at Campbellsville University. And I am joined today with a couple of our expert panelists to talk about threats to internet security and specifically the growing controversy about the relationship between the United States and China in the internet realm. Joining me today, I have two of our returning panelists, veterans from the program. From top to bottom of my screen, I have Mr. Hunter Kelly. Mr. Kelly, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing fantastic. And also joining us once again is Alex Parker. Mr. Parker, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So let's just kind of jump right into this as the way we normally do. And let's talk a little bit about the background here. Let's sort of set the stage for the viewers who may be unfamiliar with this. The controversy here, as I understand it, has something to do with the United States and the Chinese trade relationship. And the way that, or the role that cybersecurity is transforming that relationship. So to get us started, what is that trade relationship like, and how did that relationship develop?
So the trade relationship was pretty much non-existent until 1979, when the two countries established a diplomatic relationship as well as a trade agreement that has resulted to over $600 billion in 2017. But as of late, there's been some trust issues between the two countries, so that number is slowly decreasing.
Now, when you say trade relationship, what sorts of goods, what sorts of items are being exchanged? Like, is there a particular industry that we're selling to them or that we're buying from them? What does that relationship look like? In other words, are there sections of the American economy that are more dependent on buying or selling or trading things with the Chinese government or the Chinese nation than there are others? Either one of you guys. And the reason why I think the question is important is if we want to get to, as we're going to later on in the show, if we're going to get into an analysis of why internet security or cybersecurity is such a thing, then we also have to think about to what degree does the technology exchange or the electronics exchange between the United States and China shape our relationship. Do you guys have any ideas?
I know that the U.S., we're really considered innovative when it comes to the technology, and economic outsourcing has been a really important thing for the United States. And I know that China is one of the main countries that we've turned to, which has kind of led us to be so dependent on them. Take Apple, for instance. The design, they claim kind of proud of being designed in California, yet economic outsourcing, they're made somewhere else.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I remember from back in the 90s, the story of when Apple built their first manufacturing facility in China. And according to the story, Steve Jobs and a couple of the execs had traveled to China and they were being taken on a tour. And they were being taken to this area where all these factories are being built and all this construction's taking place and all the equipment's being moved in. And he said, okay, well, so where do you think that our factories would be built? And their Chinese partner said, what do you mean? We're already building your factories. These will be yours. All you have to do is sign the deal and we'll be ready for production. And ever since then, a fair amount of Apple's production has actually been German parts, American ingenuity, and technology that's assembled in the Chinese plant. So, okay, so we've got this idea of outsourcing, which creates a relationship between the two countries. Something else that I've heard discussed a lot is that it's not just goods and services that the two countries exchange. It's also debt that the two countries exchange. Is it true that there's a debt relationship between the United States and China, and which way does it flow?
Right, there is a relationship there. China tends to buy out U.S. debt, and it's way over $1 trillion at the moment in China's favor.
Is that a security concern in and of itself? I mean, the threat that the Chinese government would suddenly dump hundreds of billions of dollars of American debt on the market and devalue our currency or devalue the price of our bonds. Is that a legitimate threat or something that we should be worried about, or is all that just noise?
Yeah, I feel it is a legitimate threat to an extent. I don't know if it's going to be a warlike threat. However, I do believe that it provides China a lot of leverage over the United States.
And I think it's that leverage that we're really kind of concerned with. Now, another argument that I've heard as we're funneling in this question of technology is that democracy in the United States somehow places the United States at a disadvantage when trying to negotiate either trade or debt load or security with China. Why would that possibly be true? Why is democracy a bad thing in this situation?
Being a democracy, the U.S. is particularly really interested in prioritizing human rights and making sure that the liberties and the freedoms are protected of the U.S. citizens. And, China is not really known for that. So they have a lot more, freedom or room to do whatever they want when it comes to trade, while the U.S. has to focus on how to act on trade and other foreign policy while still protecting those liberties and freedoms.
Does and a completely separate conversation could be about discussions about freedom and liberty and technology surrounding the recent American elections. But do you think that the transparency of American society also places the United States at a disadvantage when trying to deal with a more autocratic government or a more autocratic society like China's?
For sure. It's as if we're playing by a different set of rules, if that makes sense. One country has a lot more freedom to do what they need to in the trade relationship, while the other country is being held at a higher level, it appears in most instances.
Mr. Parker, what do you think? Do you think that transparency is an issue for the United States?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that the U.S., the society, they have a lot of freedom to do whatever they want, and that comes with, social media. They have a lot of freedom as a consumer to pick whatever products they have, and I think that's really challenging part of the U.S. with trade.
So now that we're getting, I think we got some of the background taken care of. As I'm listening to what the discussions coming out of the Trump administration and the arguments they're making for why China is a security threat, most of these arguments seem to suggest that there are some technological advantages or maybe some positions in some industries that China is moving into that are a concern. What particular threats do we see coming from China? And are these threats actually legitimate?
So I think one of the things that Trump touched on when it comes to threats to China was the technological gains they're gaining with like this new smartphone called the Huawei, and it's a smartphone company that has deep ties with China. So naturally, Trump was not very thrilled when this came about, and it was on pace to be the second largest selling smartphone just behind Apple in the world until Trump had that disapproval of it.
The way you're describing it there, it almost sounds like it's just a trade war issue, not really a security issue. Were we really just worried about a cell phone manufacturer from China dominating the market, or is there more to the concerns than that?
So it does appear that it's a trade issue. However, there has been multiple people high up in government have insisted that China has taken American personal security from its citizens. And so that kind of suggestion that the higher level of people in the political system, when they suggest that, then it puts it in the back of all Americans' minds that, hey, is this really something that I should be looking into or need to, or do I need to be more cautious?
I think also in the realm of personal security, in addition to Huawei. So, well, I guess before we leave Huawei, I've also read a lot about something called 5G technology and the particular market role that Huawei is playing in 5G technology. What exactly is 5G technology? Why should I be worried about a Chinese company selling cell phones?
So 5G is like the next step of the faster network that the world is about to see, and actually it's already being seen around the world. Huawei is a really large company, and they have the abundance in countries to possibly control the 5G, and the Department of Defense has suggested that because of the resemblance of products in the past and of kind of innovation, if you want to call it that, of China goods, that they've seen resemblance in U.S. goods. So it's almost like a copying going on. And if Huawei can possibly dominate that 5G, it's thought that China may spy on the U.S. Like they may have in the past to copy things that the U.S. has innovated, and they may do the same thing if they have control of the 5G.
It almost sounds like that you're making two different arguments. I mean, one is the question of intellectual property and intellectual property rights, and then the other is the question of security. So if we focus on the security question for a second, do we actually have reason to believe that a Huawei, as opposed to an Apple, or as opposed to some other cell phone manufacturer, that they would actually be more likely to eavesdrop on American communications and record our conversations or steal our technology? Is that really a legitimate concern?
So in 2019, there was actually an arrest made of, a financial officer, Ming Wanzhou, if I'm pronouncing that correct. The U.S. Justice Department actually indicted the financial officer of Huawei for conspiring to steal American trade secrets. And it was Canada that actually arrested the chief financial officer from the U.S.'s direction.
So in addition to Huawei and 5G intellectual property, I think one of the more stark or startling accusations that the Trump administration has actually been leveled against an app called TikTok, which I actually have never used, nor have I ever, to my knowledge, downloaded on a phone, which says something about the nature of TikTok. This appears to be an app that's mostly used by people of your generation or younger. Why should I be worried about people having an app on their cell phone to watch home videos? Why is the Trump administration concerned?
So I'm like you. I have never downloaded the app or used the app, so I don't know a lot about the functions of the app. But speaking as somebody who understands Trump's concern, if China gets this personal information, could they hold it as leverage even more above the United States, or could they use this in the trade war, or could this lead to something that expands past a trade war? I think it's just the questions of China's involvement in the app. I think that's really the main concern of the Trump administration. It's not necessarily the app itself. It's more of what China could do with the information it's getting from the app and what that could lead to in the future.
And by information from the app, is it a concern about the app being able to have access to my cell phone? Or is there concern about the videos that are being uploaded to the app and how the Chinese government might try to use those videos in the future? Which one are you referring to?
I was referring more to them having it on your cell phone, but it also is very important to understand that they have access to these videos as well that could leak some important information. Like, it's just, you don't want certain information into your enemy's hands. Like, I'm not calling them an enemy, but they're not America. They're not an American ally by the least means. So it's just, you don't want certain information into the hands of a non-ally, would be the more appropriate word.
I want to come back for a second to an argument that Mr. Parker was making a little bit earlier. This debate about intellectual property. What exactly is intellectual property as opposed to something like tangible property? For the viewers at home who may not know, what were you talking about there?
So intellectual property would be kind of a personal innovation. For instance, maybe the Model T car by the Ford company in the U.S. would be an intellectual property.
So why am I worried about the Chinese government getting access to intellectual property? What would they do? Try to make a different Model T car? Like, what's the concern there?
So the Chinese, it's kind of been claimed that they're not so much an intellectual property, kind of an innovative country. They're more of a dependent country. A ZTE company in China, they actually hired 400 Japanese workers to help develop that company, opposed to innovating and developing their own. And like I brought up, the Department of Defense actually claimed that fighter jets that China claimed to come up with was actually a copy of a U.S. fighter jet. Mm. So they may be actually looking in to U.S. innovation to actually help develop their country.
As we are having this conversation, just for reference for people who may be watching this video at a later date, we are nearing the end of the American presidential election. And I think by the accounts of all major media, Joe Biden has secured enough electoral college votes in enough states to be elected president of the United States, the 46th president, and replace Donald Trump. I'm going to ask you guys to maybe go out on a limb here and look a little bit towards the future. Do you think that there will be significant policy differences between Joe Biden and Donald Trump as it relates to Chinese technology and internet security? Or do you think that essentially circumstances are what they are and Joe Biden is going to have to follow Donald Trump's path? Mr. Kelly, I'll go ahead and start with you.
Okay, so going out on a limb, I think it's safe to say that the two are going to have different policies when it comes to China and other foreign affairs. I think Joe Biden's not going to be as tough on China as Donald Trump will be. I don't know if that's going to end up being a good thing or if it's going to end up being a bad thing. It just depends on how China takes it. If they want to take advantage of Joe Biden, I could see that it could be a bad thing. However, if they're more willing to work, we might be able to get more things done in a trade relationship or even down to a allied relationship. I don't think it's necessary. It's kind of too early to tell because we haven't heard a lot on Joe Biden about what his policies are going to be. And we haven't even heard from the election yet if it's over. It's a really tough prediction to make, but I'm going to say that Joe Biden is going to have a weaker policy with China than Trump did.
Mr. Parker, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with what Hunter said. There's definitely going to be differences in between these two presidents. I could see Biden really focusing on more of a restoration of relations that may have been damaged. Depends on how you want to look at it by Trump. I think there's going to be a much less sense of nationalism by Biden. I know that the tariffs by Trump. I don't think that's really going to be prevalent with the Biden administration. I think there's going to be a lot more ground for some working together between the two.
Well, I think you're just going to have the final word there. Mr. Parker, I want to thank my panelists for joining me for today's conversation. I also want to encourage you guys at home who are watching this either live or as a late stream to check out our previous videos. We've so far this semester talked about everything from COVID-19 in Kentucky and Europe to single-payer healthcare in the United States and the potential impact that it could have on American healthcare. Also, please join us next week as we talk about culture's impact on economics, economic growth, and economic stability. I hope to see you then. Thank you and God bless.